Wonderful. We're going to start off by reviewing Unit 7. It was a fairly large unit, 11 to 15% on motivation, emotion, and personality. We're going to go through 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to go through 5 slides about the stuff and then look at 5 multiple choice questions. And I'm also going to be answering questions if you have questions. So here are all the theories of motivation. I believe this was Unit 7, Day 1 in your notebook. Is that correct? You talked about instinct and incentive theory and drive reduction and arousal and achievement theory. Do y'all have any questions about any of the theories of motivation? Jasmine, drive reduction. So whenever you see this word drive, it's referring to a biological need. Thirst, hunger, air, sleep. Some people put sex into that category. A biological need where for your body to stay balanced in homeostasis, you have to do certain things. If your cells need water, you get thirsty, you gotta go drink water. If your body temperature goes up, you get hot and sweaty, you go lower the temperature or drink some cold water or take off a jacket, right? Drive reduction. There's an internal problem that your body wants to fix. Any other terms about motivation that you would like me to go over? Anything up here that you see? Yep. Achievement theory. We talked about how there are type A and type B people. The type A people are driven by achievement. They're more stressed out. They're more competitive. They're more likely to develop heart disease. But they're the people who are driven by achievement. Some things we talked about them. We talked about the marshmallow test that Walter Mischel did on self-control and how kids who can delay gratification, meaning they're willing to wait to get an even bigger reward later on, or they're willing to work hard now to get the thing they really want. Those folks are more achievement motivated. We talk about people who are achievement motivated. Are they going to choose really easy tasks, really hard tasks, or medium tasks? Medium tasks. Why will they not choose the hard thing if they're achievement motivated? If they're achievement motivated, they're probably afraid of failure. Very good. They won't choose the easy one because they like a little bit of a challenge. Those are achievement motivated folks. How many of y'all feel like you're achievement motivated? You are competitive and driven and always want to win. And typically, this goes along with being intrinsically motivated, having the desire to accomplish things for yourself. You have self-efficacy, meaning you believe you can do it. You believe you are powerful and that your actions matter. Cool. So 2 graphics for you, little refreshers. There could be a question where it says, little Bobby feels safe and secure and spends most of his time hanging out with his friends. Which level of Maslow's hierarchy is he on? Which level, what color would you say little Bobby's on if he is spending most of his time with his friends? Yellow. Belonging and love needs, right? You can match this up with Erikson's theory. You can match this up with other humanist ideas. So the goal for Maslow is to reach your potential to self-actualize. That's the goal. Any questions about the chart? Y'all remember the Yerkes-Dodson graph? When you're doing something really complicated like brain surgery or taking a test, do you want low, moderate, or high arousal when you're doing something difficult? And which scenario will performance be the highest? When you have moderate arousal doing something difficult, that's when you will be most successful. Moderate arousal. You don't want to be too jittery and amped up. You also don't want to be too tired and chill. So moderate arousal. Now, when you're doing something boring, like listening to Mr. Jones talk, that's when like some caffeine would be good for you to keep your brain focused. Cool. Second slide of 5 about Unit 7. We talked about eating, the lateral and ventromedial hypothalamus. We talked about different chemicals that make you feel hungry and satiated. What does the word satiated mean? Yeah, it makes you feel full. So make sure you remember those chemicals. What page was that on in your notes? Day 2, does it have all the chemicals listed? Y'all wrote down orexin and PYY and leptin and stuff? Say it again. The chemicals, I don't have them in front of me. So, but pi makes you feel full, like PYY, as if you've eaten a lot of food. Leptin, lipids, fats, that makes you feel full. Insulin makes you feel hungry. Folks with diabetes, they have to have insulin before they eat. That prepares their body for food. Orexin makes you feel hungry, like a T-Rex. Which ones am I missing that are in your notes? Ghrelin gets you growling, meaning it makes you hungry. Glucose makes you feel full. It's just like sugar. If I pump you full of food, you're going to feel full. So those are the different chemicals they could ask you out. A test question might be like, which of the following does not make you feel full? And I could list out 5 chemicals, and you got to pick the one that makes you hungry. Circle ghrelin or circle orexin. Adrenaline also makes you feel full, right? Like if you're about to have a big show or a big game or a big contest, you're not going to want to eat. You're not going to be hungry because your body is shutting down your digestive system. Point 3 here, we talked about sex. Kinsey did a survey on sexuality where he asked people about their sexual activity. Masters and Johnson did the sexual response cycle, where they said that men and women have slightly different sexual response cycles. Which word up here only applies to men in the sexual response cycle? The refractory period. While women can have multiple orgasms in a row without a delay, men have a refractory period, meaning a short amount of time that has to go by before they can go through the sexual response cycle again. So the 4 stages here: excitement, plateau, orgasm, resolution. That's what they studied. Standard 4 was about stress. We've talked about this a couple times already. Selye-Stressier and his theory of general adaptation syndrome, meaning how we all respond to stress. Type A people are more stressed out. What are approaches and avoids? An approach is what? If you have an opportunity or a decision or a choice to make, the approaches are what parts of that decision? The pros, the good things about that decision, the reasons to do the thing. The avoids are the cons, the downsides, the negatives, the reasons not to do it. So if you're trying to decide whether to have M&Ms or Reese's, approach. If you're trying to decide to get punched in the face or kicked in the stomach, avoid. If you're trying to decide whether or not to go to the soccer game on Wednesday night, it's an approach avoid. There's some good things about it. There's some bad things about it. A multiple approach avoid is when you're like, do I go to the movies Wednesday? Do I go to a concert Wednesday? Or do I go to a soccer game? Because there's multiple choices that both have good and bad options. Any questions about slide 2 here? Great. Slide 3, take a look. What would you like me to go over? These theories of emotion. What day was this in your notes? How was your thing wherever you were? Good. Space stuff. What would you like me to go over from the emotion theories here? Great. Lazarus. We associate Lazarus with Schachter. Lazarus said that your thinking mattered. Your thinking mattered, which is also what Schachter said. So here's an image to help refresh you. So remember, William James had a theory of emotion, the James-Longuet theory. 2 guys, one name, last name James, one last name Longuet. They said, when you see a snake, your body responds, then you feel the emotion. What Schachter's 2-factor theory is, they took the James thing, your body responds, but they added in a second factor. They said you also have to do some thinking, and that your body combined with the thinking, that's what determines the emotion you feel. So Lazarus was the guy who said, like, thinking matters a ton. Lazarus said that, it's all about the thinking. The body doesn't actually matter that much. The thinking is what makes you feel everything. So both Lazarus and Schachter emphasized thinking that took place. Cannon-Bard said, what happened? Which came first, the physical or the emotional? Very good, Jaden. Cannon-Bard said it happened at the exact same time. They are simultaneous. Cannon-Bard, all at once. So that's the theory of emotion. Ledoux's theory, I think we talked about how there are fast emotions and slow emotions. Kind of like there's fast pain and slow pain, fast emotions and slow emotions. So he just said that your body experiences different emotions differently depending on how powerful the emotion is. Paul Ekman said that the faces you make impact the emotions that you feel, and that different cultures make similar faces and have similar emotions. Anything else from that day you'd like me to go over as you look back at your notes? Test question could be, which of the following was not one of Paul Ekman's universal emotions? And they could list out 5 emotions, and you have to identify which of them was not a universal emotion. you may want to look back at your notes, think about inside out, and try and remember those. Cool. The fourth of 5 slides about Unit 7 is about personality. This was a fun section of the unit. We talked about the neo-Freudians, the new Freudians, like Jung and Adler and Karen Horney. Make sure you pronounce her name properly. How Adler, when I see Adler, I think toddler. He says that like your relationship with your siblings when you're little, that's what determines your personality, whether you're the oldest or the youngest or a middle child, and that you always feel inferior. You feel less valued than your siblings. So you try and make up for it. You try and compensate. Bandura keeps coming up. They love asking about Bandura and the Bobo dolls and how we learn by watching others. Costa and McCrae, 5 syllables. They did the big 5. You remember what the mnemonic was for the big 5? You could say canoe or you could say ocean. So another test question could be, which of the following traits was not part of the big 5? Or they might give you a scenario and say, you know, Summer is incredibly hardworking. She stays extremely organized. She keeps a great calendar. According to Costa and McCrae, which trait would Summer be highest in? If she is organized and hardworking, which trait would she be highest in? Not openness, not agreeableness, conscientiousness, paying attention to details. That's the type of question they might ask. So make sure that you review those. We've talked a lot about Freud, id, ego, superego. Which of these 3 wants to follow the rules? It's the good one, the moral one. The super one is the good part of you. Which of these is the little devil inside of you? The id is the little devil inside of you. And the ego is in between. It's trying to navigate these 2 different parts of you. The unconscious, you only know the defense mechanism. Repression, regression, reaction formation, sublimation, catharsis, all the things that you do to deal with your anger. What page are those notes on? The defense mechanisms, we're on Unit 7, Day 4. Great, so y'all list out like 8 or 9 of them. If you have any questions, let me know. Freud also talked about how he could show you a picture of a blob, like an ink blot, or a picture of, you know, someone doing something. And when you tell a story about it, you project, you're projecting, you're taking the way you feel and you're putting it on those people. You're making it seem like they're the ones who feel that way. Those are projective tests that Freud used. Jung talked about how we're all connected. Maslow we went over. Carl Rogers said, he said, active listening, right? We need to take care of our patients because what we're all looking for in life is to be understood and known, to have people feel empathy for us so that we understand ourselves properly. Anything you notice from these days that you want me to go over that's in your notebooks? Any terms or ideas or names? Yep. Archetypes. Everyone say archetype. Archetypes are the idea that Jung said that within all of humans there are these symbols or these character types that we can all identify with. So some of y'all were the warrior or the sage or the mystic or the lover. And Jung said that deep down, we're all looking for the same kinds of things. That was Jung's idea. We're all connected. You have a personal unconscious, like Freud said, but we also have a collective unconscious. We're all connected. Jung was the one who sounded like he was high. We're all connected. Anything else you see in your notebooks that you want me to go over from those days? Cool. So the last standard they gave us about Unit 7 is just like, make sure you know these people. So I went over all of them already, but make sure you have them in your notes. They love to ask about them. There'll probably be a question about several of these people. William James, who was also the founder of functionalism from Unit 1, he pops back up in this unit. Alfred Kinsey did the survey about sexuality. He said that you could be asexual or bisexual or mostly homosexual or mostly heterosexual, but that sexuality is more fluid. It's on a spectrum. Maslow was a happy humanist. Schachter said that thinking matters. Selye, Straussier. Let's look at 5 practice multiple choice questions. Wasn't too bad. In an emergency situation, the adrenal glands. So when you are stressed, what happens when you get adrenaline? So does your heart rate go up? Yeah. Does your blood pressure go up? Yeah. Does your blood sugar go up? It does. Yeah. So out of D and E, which of those is false? D is false. Adrenaline makes you moody. You have more mood swings. You're all over the place. You get angry, you get excited, you get scared. So D is not true. E happens as well. We talk about how your stomach slows down when you're stressed. So heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, blood sugar goes up, and your digestive system goes down. All those things are true. Your mood swings increase. Question number 2. Of the following, which theory emphasizes the urge for an optimal level of stimulation? Literally, this question is basically saying, what is a synonym for to be stimulated? What's the answer? Very good. C, arousal theory, that some of y'all are sensation seekers. You like roller coasters and scary movies, or some of us are lame and we prefer books and ice cream. Number 3, research suggests that the ability to cope with stress in everyday situations is most related to a person's what? What is the best predictor of whether you're going to be a optimist or a pessimist and how your body responds to stress? B or D? What'd you say? B. Boy is in bog, or D is in dog?
Bog. Boy, B as in boy.
B as in boy is correct.
Bog, right?
B is in bog. Yeah, I think it's funny.
B as in boy.
Because it's funnier when you say B as in bog, because it doesn't help at all, because it just makes them think you're saying D as in dog. You know, B as in elephant. Okay. The ability to control your stressors, whether or not you have an internal or external locus of control, that's what will determine whether you're an optimist or a pessimist and how you respond to stress. Think about learned helplessness. If you feel like there's nothing you can do about the shock, you're just going to give up and you're going to be overwhelmed. And you're going to have health problems as a result. If you feel like you have self-efficacy, that you're in control, you'll do better. Life will be better for you. The 4th question, in which stage of Hans Selye's GAS can people be vulnerable to illness, collapse, and death? It's related to that last question, but if you're super stressed out, in which stage will you get sick? Yeah, the 3rd stage. So the 1st stage is alarm, the 2nd stage is resistance, and the 3rd stage is exhaustion. That's his theory. So 70, number 4 here was C. And then the last question, we went over this, but the Schachter 2-factor theory, what component does it contain that's not in William James's theory of emotion? Which of these terms has to do with appraisal of your environment and thinking? Which of these terms is a synonym for thinking about what's around you? D, as in dog, cognitive labeling. You're thinking about what's around you, and that's what determines your emotion. Any questions? I'm actually going to give you all a minute. Look through your notebooks, all of Unit 7. Just flip, flip, flip. I'm going to pause the recording. And if there's anything else you want me to go over, now's the time to ask. All right, Unit 8, clinical psychology. Clinical psychology means disorders and treatment. This was 12 to 16%. I think this was the 2nd largest unit after Unit 5 on cognition. There will be 12 to 16 questions out of the 100 that are just about Unit 8. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3. We only have 4 slides about Unit 8, but it's chock full of material, so follow along. You should have a Unit 8 Day 1 reading somewhere. That was a worksheet I gave you, a little handout that you answered. Wow, Nathan has his right there in the right spot. Can I borrow it? So the Unit 8 Day 1 reading talked about the history of the DSM. It talked about the medical model. It talked about how the word insane is actually a legal term, not a psychological term. And then it talked about the 3 Ds, how we know if something is actually a disorder or not. So make sure you know what that means. And then on the back of that worksheet, and you can find this online on eClass still, or if you want me to print one out for you, it talked about the Rosenhan study, which is up here and bolded. You remember what Rosenhan had his buddies do? Rosenhan? They pretended they were hearing voices and wanted to see what the mental hospitals would do. And basically the mental hospitals locked them up and wouldn't let them out and made them take a ton of drugs, even though they weren't actually sick. So his whole point here was that we do not do a good job of determining who is healthy and who is not. And there's too much stigma around mental health. We need to help folks out. And that's what these reformers, Philippe Pinel and Dorothy Dix, also said was, we can fix the mental health system. We can help people get better. The DSM-5, who makes the DSM-5? Who publishes it? The APA. It's the book that is supposed to provide diagnosis and treatment for folks. Okay. It doesn't explain why Emily is the way she is, but it's supposed to help us diagnose Emily so that Emily can be better going forward. Any questions about the history of clinical psychology? Anything from that worksheet? Anything from day one? Deviant means weird. So you have something that no one else has. You do something, you feel something, you act a certain way, and no one else acts that way. It's very unusual, deviant. Distressing is that it don't make sense. When people see you do the thing, they get stressed. You get stressed about it. All right, we talk about folks with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and I have to like check the lock 7 times before bed. That is weird. It's deviant. It also doesn't make sense. It's distressing. When we see you do that, we're like, why is he doing that? When we ask you, hey man, why are you checking the locks? You're like, I don't know, I just have to. That's causing you distress. The third D word, dysfunctional, means you're not able to live a normal life. Like you're not getting a full night's sleep because every 2 hours you're getting up to check the locks. Or you're not able to have a job because you're so worried about germs that you can't be near other people. If it prevents you from living a normal life, it's dysfunctional, and that helps you get qualified to have a psychological disorder. So the next couple slides are going to be us kind of going through some of the different types of disorders. So the big one they like to ask about, has a whole standard to itself, is schizophrenia. Why do I have the word dopamine here? Too much dopamine is considered a cause of schizophrenia. Hallucinations and delusions, are those positive or negative symptoms? They're positive symptoms. Does positive mean a good, happy symptom? Positive means you're experiencing something that other people are not. It's being added to your life. The negative symptoms are when you are not doing things that other people do. You're not showing the normal emotions or physical activity. Treatment, antipsychotics, Risperdal is one that we talk about a lot. Thorazine is one we talk about a lot. But an antipsychotic, meaning you're not understanding reality. You're having psychosis, problems with reality. So we have to help you with that. Any questions about schizophrenia? If your mom gets sick with a virus while she's pregnant with you, that can also mean an increased chance of schizophrenia. It's highly genetic. Family members have it, more likely that you're going to get it. A lot of these things that's true for. All right, let's look at standard 3. Anxiety disorders. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Obsessions, what you think. Compulsions, what you do. It's probably one of the most famous anxiety disorders. We just talked about it. You remember what GAD stands for? Generalized anxiety disorder. Is it extreme anxiety or a little bit of anxiety? A little bit. Is it occasional or constant? It's you constantly being a little bit anxious for no good reason. That's what GAD is. Phobic, you know what phobias are. Intense fear of something that you don't need to be afraid of. Panic disorder, panic attacks. It impacts your breathing and your heart rate and sweat, and you lose control of your body. And therefore, sometimes you develop other fears. You don't want to go out to new places. You develop agoraphobia because you're worried about panic attacks. Or claustrophobia can lead to panic attacks. PTSD, you've experienced some sort of pain, trauma, and you keep reliving it, having nightmares. You can't stop thinking about it. That's what PTSD is. Not everyone who experiences trauma has PTSD. Some people experience what's called post-traumatic growth, where they go through something terrible and it actually makes them and their lives better. Some people don't. Some people just have PTSD for a while until they get therapy and help for that. So it's about how your brain responds to stress. Any questions about these things? Anything you see in your notebooks that you want me to go over? Symptoms, words, terms, questions? We'll get to treatment on the last slide here. Yeah, we'll talk about those, the drugs and things. All right, standards 4 through 9. Whew. Standard 4 was about mood disorders. 2 types, bipolar, where you go back and forth, and not borderline personality, but bipolar is like long stretches of sadness followed by long stretches of mania. Depressive disorders, you can have mild depression called dysthymia. It's in your notes. You can have seasonal affect disorder, which is when you get sad and lazy and tired and grumpy during the winter when there's not as much sunlight. You can have postpartum depression after pregnancy. And the worst is MDD, major depressive disorder. That's the one where there's like really something going on with your brain, where weeks can go by and you just don't want to leave your house or your bed at all. That's MDD. Questions about number 4, mood disorders? What day are you on in your notes? Day 2. Okay, what about somatoform? Somatic symptom, is that also day 2? Day 3, okay. Soma, anybody remember what this root always refers to? Soma always refers to the body. So somatic symptom or somatoform, it's when your body has some sort of a symptom that they cannot explain. A weird pain, a weird ache, and oftentimes it's caused by stress. So you're so nervous about something that you start to have this physical symptom that does not make sense. Sometimes this is called a conversion disorder. It's like the stress converts into a physical ailment, a physical illness. It's like your brain is making your body sick when it doesn't need to be. It sucks. Number 6, anorexia and bulimia. So anorexia, not eating, and it's usually accompanied with cognitive issues. You don't view your body accurately. You're not thinking about food accurately, so it impacts what you eat. Bulimia is also marked by some kind of purging. I think we just talked about them in passing, because I think that y'all talk a lot about them in health class, anorexia, bulimia. So it's stuff that's fairly common sense, but they are in the book. They are psychological disorders. So same with number 7. We didn't talk a lot about substance disorders because y'all kind of understand how addiction works. You build up tolerance to some sort of chemical, whether it's alcohol or meth or pick your poison. You build up a tolerance to it. You need more and more of that thing to have the same effect. If you stop using it after you're addicted, you'll experience withdrawal symptoms. And it's totally messing with your brain and body because the drugs act as agonists or antagonists for neurotransmitters in the body. So they can impact your muscular system, your thinking, your physical body, your appetite, your health, your sleep, all of the above. So substance disorders. Alcohol use is probably the most common. Caffeine. Many of you have caffeine addictions. Many of you are drug addicts. Caffeine addictions. So that counts as a substance disorder. Number 8 was a fun category. We talk about DID. What's DID more commonly referred to as? Multiple personality disorder. Yeah. When someone, sometimes it's because of a trauma of some sort. It's like their personality has split and they have different parts of themselves that only come out at certain times. So multiple personality or dissociative identity disorder. We talk about how dissociative amnesia, when you haven't had a physical accident, it's not you got hit in the head with a baseball and develop retroactive amnesia. Dissociative amnesia is when, like, because maybe of trauma of some sort, you just start to forget your past. Dissociative fugue is you don't just forget your past, but what do? With dissociative fugue, you run away, you wander, you go somewhere new, you start over, new identity, new life. And it's as if you can't remember your old self. You're forgetting and you go somewhere new and you like try to start over. When people are like, where did you used to live before this? You're like, I don't know. I just showed up here one day. Yeah, people who have experienced trauma, that will sometimes happen to them in very rare cases. Cool. The last category, number 9, personality disorders. I showed y'all a real fancy chart with 3 types of clusters. Like cluster A was the odd ones and cluster B was the dramatic ones. What was cluster C? Odd, dramatic. The which ones? The anxious, fearful ones. So OCPD, is that in cluster C? It's when you kind of have signs of OCD, but you don't have an issue with yourself. You have an issue relating to other people. We talk about antisocial, meaning these are our psychopaths. These folks would do poorly on the MMPI. They have no empathy. They want to hurt people. We talk about histrionic. They want everyone's attention. We talk about narcissistic. They think they're better than everyone else. We talk about borderline, going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. You may want to review those 10 personality disorders. Any questions about any of these categories? The last slide is going to be about treatment. But before we get into treatment, any questions about the categories and the diagnosis? So treatment, I just kind of summarized the key points the College Board asks about. They could go deeper, but here are the big ideas. ABC, Aaron Beck did what's called cognitive therapy, where he said that your thinking has issues and we need to help you change your thinking. Albert Ellis was similar. This was also a type of cognitive behavior therapy, but his was the harsh, mean kind, where he basically yelled at you and told you that you were being dumb and you needed to stop it. He would confront his patients. We talked a ton about Freud, but his therapy, psychoanalysis, was about letting people talk, free association, until they kind of reveal things about themselves. He focused on your dreams, what they meant, what they symbolized, and he would sometimes use hypnosis to try and figure out what was going on with people. Mary Cover Jones and Wolpe were behaviorists, kind of like Skinner. They talk about how we can use rewards and punishments and exposure to change people's behavior and help them with their phobias. Carl Rogers said, we just got to listen to people and take care of them and love on them and they'll be okay. Client-centered or person-centered therapy. The biological perspective says people who have disorders need to take medications. What neurotransmitter do SSRIs target? What's the S stand for? Serotonin, right? So if you have depression, you might take a SSRI. There are anti-anxiety medications that slow your brain down, help you focus. Lithium, which reminds me of batteries, how batteries have a plus and a minus, 2 poles. Lithium is used for bipolar disorder. The antipsychotics are for things like schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder, or in some personality disorders, they'll also prescribe antipsychotics if you just do not have a good grasp of reality, how the world works, how you should be relating to others. They might prescribe antipsychotics. This stuff is also in the College Board standards. We didn't talk about these things on the bottom. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Individual therapy is when you go see a therapist or counselor on your own. Group therapy is when there's several folks who have the same thing you have, and y'all meet with a counselor or therapist together. What's the most famous form of group therapy? AA, Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, when they bring a group of people who are struggling with the same things, and they can help support each other, keep each other accountable. They found that to be really effective for some things. Okay. Depending on the diagnosis, different types of therapy might be best for you. Okay. Eclectic biopsychosocial is like most therapists and counselors use a mix of these things or use alternative treatments. We talked about electrical therapy. We talked about EMDR, where they have you move your eyes back and forth or tap with different parts of your body while you relive old experiences, and that's supposed to help you process the trauma. So there's lots of different options for therapy. If y'all feel like you need therapy counseling and you go to one counselor and it does not go well, do not tell yourself that it's hopeless, that you can't be fixed, that you're going to be miserable forever. Try and find a counselor or therapist who uses a different strategy and uses a different technique. Okay. One of my best friends, I'm saying this because one of my best friends has like been in and out of therapy for years, and she just found a new therapist who uses EMDR instead of using like talk therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. This new therapist is using EMDR, so it's more like brain-based stuff. And like in 3 sessions, she's had like several breakthroughs, which like in years of therapy, she hasn't had that much progress. So super cool. Find a therapist, find a counselor that works for you. I have 5 questions. These are actual AP exam questions. A therapist who uses behaviorism, systematic desensitization, to help a child overcome a phobia will probably begin treatment by doing what? This is a hard question, but what's the first thing a therapist, if you're going to go do exposure therapy, what's the first thing they have you do before they get deep into the therapy at all? It's almost like the pre-work they make you do. What's your guess? It's C. Yeah, like we talked about this with a spider, right? You would make a list of all the things about spiders that scare you and put them in order from least scary to most scary. They'd have the child make the list of things that frighten them. A therapist who helps a client replace irrational thoughts with alternative patterns of thinking is using what's called. Which of these terms means to change your thinking? A. I don't know if I've used this exact term all year long, but y'all on the exam, 2 weeks from tomorrow, use common sense, okay? Cognitive restructuring, changing your thinking. Cognitive dissonance is when you on your own are experiencing two thoughts that are in tension. I'm a good person, I just ignored the homeless guy. And you have to kind of reconcile that. So you start to tell yourself, cognitive dissonance is like when you convince yourself like, oh, if I had given that guy money, he would use it for drugs. I'm still a good person. I'm a good person for not giving the homeless guy money. That's cognitive dissonance. You convince yourself to change your thinking. Cognitive restructuring, you're working with a therapist to change your thinking. Does that make sense? And we're going to talk more about cognitive dissonance on Wednesday's class when we review Unit 9. We'll talk all about Festinger's experiment one last time. Question 3. The client says, I've been feeling totally worthless, like I never do anything right. And the therapist just kind of bounces back. He reflects that idea. I guess you feel that way a lot. You feel like you're no good. It's hard to have feelings like that. Which of the following types of therapy would be likely to involve the exchange above? So in which of these 5 types of therapy does a therapist use active listening to kind of bounce back what the client said? Hold up a mirror to them to let them kind of think through things for themselves. It's E. This is a Rogers form of therapy. People who miss this often choose A. What would A say? A would be like, that's a stupid way to think. No one's worthless. You can't mess everything up. It would be more confronting, okay? Person-centered therapy is like bouncing back using active listening, trying to show some empathy here. Number 4, what is true about people with schizophrenia? Is it the same thing as DID? No. Does schizophrenia just go away completely if you take the right medicine? No, you got to manage it. Are they unable to understand simple statements? No, they can normally communicate fine. Yeah. They typically experience onset and late adolescence or early adulthood. Is that when schizophrenia pops up? This is the correct answer. Yeah, normally like 19, 20, 21 is like the age where folks start to show signs. This one, E, is more about the dissociative disorders as well. They love asking about the difference between schizophrenia and the dissociative disorders. So be aware of those. Last multiple choice question. Which of the following best represents how the humanists would explain anxiety? Well, talking about all the chemicals, what perspective talks about the chemicals and things? The biological perspective. Number 2, your thought processes, is that humanist? That's the cognitive perspective. Number 3, about conditioning, which perspective is that? That's the behavioral perspective, Skinner and Wolpe and Mary Cooper Jones. Which perspective is about the unconscious? Freud, so the you can say psychoanalytic or psychodynamic. A gap between their ideal and real self. This is about humanism, reaching your potential, closing the gap, making your way up that hierarchy. Here's an actual FRQ that was given. Discuss the cause of anxiety from each of the following perspectives. So according to these 4 perspectives, what makes you have anxiety? Part 2, what is a treatment that each of these perspectives would use? I'm gonna give you all 60 seconds to think through this on your own, and then I'll show you what one student wrote. Let's look at how a student responded to part A. This is an actual student's response. What is wrong with their number one? Why didn't they get the point here? What should they have talked about for point one? Behaviorism. They should have talked about, they could have talked about conditioning. So through classical conditioning, they have gone through acquisition to be afraid of certain fears that were associated with painful responses. Or they could talk about operant conditioning. Because they've been punished in the past for certain behaviors, they have anxiety about those actions. They should talk about conditioning or learning of some kind. They got point two. What was the key word that they included in point two? They talked about the unconscious. They got point three. What was the key word in point three? So, I mean, biological was in the prompt. I think my guess would be predispositions. Predispositions means something you inherit. So basically that word, I would have rather they said, they talked about inheriting from their parents or passed on in their genes or inside their chemical, inside their body. Those probably would have been better things, but I think this word helped. And then, I think that's the main idea actually. Yeah, predispositions. Number 4, what's the key phrase? Yeah, how they organize their thoughts. So this student only wrote a sentence for each. Y'all should try and write a little more just to be safe, but write at least a sentence for every point. On Friday, when we do our performance final, write at least a sentence for each. Even if you're like, Jones, I have no idea what's asking, just write a sentence just in case, okay? Here's what they put for points 5 through 8. What's the key for, well, I'll give you a second to look over, but obviously I bold them all. So they got all 4 of these points. Hopefully you talk about some of these things. What key phrase in point 5 was the best example of a type of treatment? Yeah, systematic desensitization. It would have been better if they'd explained this. If they'd said, where you slowly expose someone to their fear. That probably would have been better, but they still get the point. And number 6, what's the key phrase of the type of treatment? Nice, Bailey. Free association. And then they define it, where the patient says anything that comes to mind. And then they use 2 other Freud words here. Resistances, meaning things buried deep down. And then the therapist is in charge of trying to figure out what these things mean, interpret the symbols. So this is a Freudian idea here. Sometimes it's called insight therapy. You're hoping that they just realize what their problem is. Number 7, what's the key phrase? Drug treatments, and then they give an example, right? So some drugs can calm the patient. And then number 8, cognitive psychology would have the patients associate the anxiety arousing stimulus with another stimulus that does not cause them to experience anxiety. I actually don't love that answer because that seems kind of behaviorism-y, associations and things. But I think that the College Board interpreted, when I looked it up, they said that this seemed like a way for the patient to change their thinking. So they gave them credit for point 8. Pretty cool. They got 7 of the 8 here. Okay. Just so y'all know, y'all's free responses this year, they've already announced, as far as I know, they've announced that each free response will be worth 7 points. So there'll be 14 points total. And I keep telling y'all, best case scenario, y'all get all 14 points. If you can get half the points, that puts you on track to pass the AP exam. You can get half the multiple choice and half the free response. That'll be a passing grade. Okay. So when I grade y'all's, this is fun, y'all like this. When I grade y'all's performance finals on Friday, it's going to be 2 free responses worth 7 points each. And if you get 7 of the 14 points, that will be a 100 in the grade book. So I'm giving y'all a huge curve. Okay, so I think y'all will like it, but y'all need to be studying because there'll be some stuff from unit 1 and some stuff from your other units throughout the course of the year. Okay, y'all's homework due Wednesday, Thursday, preferably by our next class, but it'll actually be open until Thursday, is to do the unit 7 and 8 progress checks over the stuff we reviewed today. Watch the daily videos if you want. Keep going back to your notebooks. Retake old tests. I'm starting to get notifications that some of y'all are retaking these. That is awesome. Great way to get ready for a test is to take your old tests. Go back and look at your test corrections. There are crash course videos you can watch. My YouTube link is posted on eClass. Y'all can get on my Quizlet and look things up, okay? We did not spend a ton of time today reviewing. We have over half an hour left. I need y'all to use this time wisely. Either take an old test or watch some videos or do both the progress checks. But use this time productively to get ready for the AP exam.